detectives who've been involved in the case from the Oakland
Good afternoon,
County
everyone. Thank you for
Sheriff's
coming and
Office,
thank you for your patience.
Sam Mars.
My name is David Williams. I'm the Chief Assistant here at the Oakland County Prosecutor's
Prosecutor
Office.
McDonald will announce the charges
Standing
in this petition
here
today.
with
Take your
us are
questions.
Assistant Prosecutor Kanika
Before she does
Ferenczi,
that, I wanna
Assistant
remind
Prosecutor
everyone
Lauren
the
Benninger,
charges are only
Chief of our
allegations.
Special Victims Unit Sarah
The defendant
Green,
is presumed
our Chief
innocent
of
unless
Administration
until
Betsy
proven
Haig, and of
guilty.
course Prosecutor McDonald.
Also, the
We're also
details
joined
of the
by
prosecutor's remarks today
detectives
come
who've been
from
involved in the
swear
case
to
from the
in
Oakland
50th
County
District
Sheriff's
Court
Office.
earlier
That's
today.
Lieutenant Sam Marsban and Detective John Brish. Prosecutor McDonald will announce the charging decision today and take your questions, but before she does that, I want to remind everyone that charges are only allegations and the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. Also, the details in the prosecutor's remarks today come from the swear to in 50th District Court earlier today. Prosecutor McDonald.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First, I'd like to announce that we have authorized 3 charges of first-degree child abuse against Kelly Bryant, a 34-year-old resident of Pontiac. My office has already advised the court in the neglect proceedings that we will be asking to terminate the defendant's parental rights. In every case of child abuse, my office focuses first and foremost on the best interest of the child or children and on holding those responsible for abuse accountable. The 3 children in this case suffered unimaginable abuse and neglect over a long period of time. Thankfully, they've now been rescued from that, and our first priority has been and will continue to be their safety and well-being. I want to briefly address, though, why we're here. Since the first announcement over the weekend by the sheriff, this case has captured the attention of the people across our community, our county, our state, and even internationally, because people are rightfully concerned about the welfare of these children. And we're holding this press conference because, like all other decisions, we balance the interests of public safety, media attention and inquiries, and balancing everyone's right to a fair trial, which is why the events and facts that are disclosed here today are strictly confined to what's already been placed on the record in the swear-to this morning in the 50th District Court. When their circumstances became public, including the photos of the home, although law enforcement did not identify the defendant, she was quickly identified on social media and also has been reported in other news media outlets, which is why we are naming her today. We have recently, luckily, been fortunate enough to, for the first time ever, hire our public information officer, Jeff Watruck, who's in the back of the room. Many of you have already spoken to and will continue to. And we're lucky to have him. The children are currently staying with a relative. All 3 children received immediate medical attention at a local hospital, and they were interviewed by trained forensic interviewers at Care House. Considering what they've experienced, they appear to be doing okay. Obviously, the trauma here is significant, and my office, including our victim services section, will make sure these children are supported during this process. Today, the charges are 3 counts of child abuse in the first degree. This is the most serious charge for child abuse, and if convicted,
with her 4 children. At some point between 20 and 2021, the suspect moved out of her home, leaving 3 of her children abandoned in that location, while 1 of her children went to live with their father. On February 14th, 2025, police were called to the home by the landlord. Police learned that the landlord was concerned for the welfare of Ms. Bryant, who had not paid rent on the property since October of 2024. Police entered with the landlord and discovered her 3 children, ages 12, 13, and 15. Her daughters were hiding in a bathroom that was filled with feces, piles of trash, and completely non-functional, while her son was hiding in another room. Police were astonished to find anyone in the location because it appeared to be uninhabitable, with piles of garbage and refuse several feet high, including large amounts of human excrement. The children were afraid to come out of their hiding places and to speak with the police. Police had to repeatedly advise the children that they were there to help and they were safe. The children's bodies and clothing were covered in feces, and the girls had difficulty physically walking outside of the residence. In addition to the physical difficulty, they appeared to be and were immediately overstimulated upon leaving the residence. All 3 children were transported via ambulance to the hospital and showed signs of severe neglect. At the hospital, the children struggled with completing basic hygiene tasks like flushing a toilet and brushing their teeth because they had not done it in years. The children were forensically interviewed and described having virtually no physical contact with their mother, suspect Bryant, or the outside world in several years. The girls had not left the residence in several years, and her son had only left the home to go into the yard approximately 2 times, never venturing away from the house more than to check the mailbox. During his interview, her son stated that he would text their mother when their food supply was running low and she would have food delivered to the residence. The children shared that during the years they were concealed in the home, their suspect Bryant failed to provide toilet paper, soap, or shampoo. The defendant instructed the kids that they were not to answer the door or leave the house. All 3 children expressed fear about what their mother's response would be if they left the home. Defendant concealed the children from family and friends and lied about who was caring for the kids and their whereabouts. The defendant took the active steps of lying and concealing to make sure the children went undiscovered, and she took these actions knowing that her children would suffer serious physical and emotional harm as a result. Those are the statements made in the swear-to this morning. And again, these are allegations. I do want to point out and thank all the officers that were on scene that day. I personally viewed the videos and images and was struck at what a difficult situation it was, but in the face of that difficulty, offered compassion to these kids. I also want to thank Detective John Brish and Lieutenant Sam Marsban for their dedication in working this case, and of course the assistant prosecutors involved, Chief of Administration Betsy Haig, Chief of our SVU Sarah Green, APA Lauren Benninger, Chief of the Juvenile Division Kelly Collins, and APA Kanika Ferenczi for their diligent efforts in this case. At present, we've not been presented with a request for criminal charges against any other individuals. That does not mean that won't happen in the future. I just can't speak to it at this point. Morally, there is plenty of responsibility to go around for how this was allowed to happen. However, these 3 kids were entrusted to the care of their mother, Kelly Bryant, and the evidence suggests that she effectively abandoned them to a revolting pit of refuse and squalor. There must be consequences for those actions. The defendant is presently in custody. The 3 children in this case were interviewed at Care House, and I want to emphasize how important Care House is to this community. These kids were interviewed in a safe environment by an experienced, trained forensic interviewer, and these interviews are important in all child abuse cases. They allow each child the chance to tell us their story without the influence of the abuser and without using leading questions that could taint their testimony. I can't emphasize enough how important Care House is. If you suspect a child is abused or neglected, you too can report this to CPS. The hotline is 855-444-3911. And I urge anyone who suspects that a child is being abused or neglected to report that using that number. We need to make sure that every child is safe and well cared for. And before I take questions, I just want to remind you that these charges, again, are only allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. Questions?
Not having been to the area, neighbors, anybody, I mean, I think what maybe people struggle with is how intimidated by their mother, yes, but how they could not even venture out of the home, or just nobody knowing that they were there, or can you add context into, how that can happen?
I can only comment on what's been placed on the record. That's my ethical duty, but I will say that we see time and time again, victims of severe abuse of all ages make decisions that don't seem reasonable to us. And what we know is that that's very common. And there's a multitude of reasons why they didn't leave the home. We just don't know that yet. Yes?
Have prosecutors or deputies interviewed the fathers of the children?
They have. Yes.
Multiple fathers or one father?
I think it's already public record that of the 4 kids, there are 2 fathers.
Prosecutor McDonald,
Yes.
What stands out about this case to you? I mean, it's a pretty significant child abuse
That's a difficult question and a really good question. You know, I said yesterday, and I've said this to the sheriff personally, we say a lot, this is the worst I've ever seen. And I've stopped saying that because every time I say that, I see something worse. It was unbelievable what they were living with for years. Unbelievable. It wouldn't be surroundings where you would want any living creature living in, creature or animal, or particularly human beings. I mean, these kids, not to have even basic hygiene tools. And I guess what stands out the most for me is no love. There was nobody there to care for them for between 3 and 4 years. No parent, nobody physically present to let them know that they were safe and they were loved. Yes.
Did she have any prior contact with CPS or a prior criminal record?
I can't comment on that.
Is she being held on any outstanding charges, or is it just on this and then she'll be arraigned tomorrow?
We are not aware of any other holds or matters that she would be held under. At this moment, she's being held because of these pending charges. Now they're official, and she'll be arraigned, I believe, tomorrow.
Can you provide more context, appreciating what you said about, you mentioned that he would text his mother, one of the older boy. So he had access to a phone apparently, but.
All the children had access to the phones. They all had their own phones.
So would they see her? I've read an account that maybe she dropped some food off weekly, or can you talk about how they survived if they didn't leave the home, how often she came, and where she was staying?
There was no, according to the evidence that's been placed on the record, there was no physical contact whatsoever. And I don't think it's accurate to say that they had food dropped off weekly. Sometimes, right. Sometimes it was longer than that.
But
and
she was the one distributing?
No, not all the time.
Okay.
Not all the time.
You had said the restroom was not, is that what you said? The restroom was not maybe properly functioning in there, but do we know if there was heat or air conditioning in the summer?
I don't have that. That has not been put on the record. But I do not believe that there was. I believe there was heat enough so that the children were at least able to live there. If not, as you know, given the cold temperatures, there would have been signs of freezing to death.
Where was she staying?
I don't have that information. Not there.
And obviously you've charged her, so she thinks I'm assuming that obviously there's competence. So not that there's ever a reason for something of this horrific nature, but any inferences to the why that she just decided to abandon her kids beyond, some might think mental issues, but obviously not if you're charging her. Right.
Without commenting particularly on this case, as the prosecutor over the last over 4 years, I've been asked, and I hear repeatedly that question on all of the terrible, violent, atrocious acts that we see, the why, and the answer is we don't know why. We can't get in the mind of somebody else, but we do know what the evidence shows, and we have the law, and nobody who is not found competent can stand trial. So I can't comment on that right now, but just to say that sometimes there isn't a why. Yes.
Is there any evidence to suggest that their substance abuse may have been involved or anything?
I can't comment on that.
Has mom been cooperative?
The defendant has an absolute right to remain silent, so any comment I would make on whether or not she's spoken to the police would be a violation of her rights.
Thank you.
Longer term, can you share what the plan is for the children? And some may wonder if family have taken them in now, how they didn't know about. I'm not trying to assess blame by asking, but where were they prior? How did they not know?
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of questions. Obviously.
Good question. And the thing that I want to stress here is that we are responsible for prosecuting all of the criminal cases in this county. We're also responsible for representing the Department of Health and Human Services in child abuse and neglect proceedings. So we are simultaneously prosecuting the criminal case against mom and the neglect proceeding pertaining to the kids. So we will be asking our client, the Department of Health and Human Services, to file a petition to terminate her rights. So there's just a lot. A lot we can't really get into, except I do want to say that our client, the Department of Health and Human Services, their number one priority is the care and welfare of children, and wherever they are placed, they do their due diligence to make sure that is a safe placement. And all I can say is that those questions were asked and obviously satisfied. And the other thing I want to say is there's been such an outpouring in this community, but I would just stress that everybody knows everybody, and any outrage is totally understandable, but we want to do as much as we can to protect their placement so that they are protected.
But to be clear, they are not wards of the state, they are with family.
They are in the care and custody of the Department of Health and Human Services, and they are placed through DHHS with a relative placement by the court. And again, those are two different proceedings. Yes, that we are, there was a preliminary hearing yesterday, and we'll continue to provide information about that as that moves along.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.